My name is David. I'm 32 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I was the family disappointment. My sister Amanda had just bought her third investment property in downtown Charlotte, while I was still driving strangers around in my 2018 Honda Civic, trying to make rent on my studio apartment. "David's still playing with his little app," Amanda said, cutting into her prime rib at our usual Sunday lunch spot. The contempt in her voice made my stomach turn. "When are you going to get a real job like a grown man?" I gripped my coffee cup tighter, feeling the familiar burn of humiliation creep up my neck. Mom just stared at her plate, and Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. This was nothing new. Amanda had been calling me an app loser for the past 4 years, ever since I started driving for Uber full-time after losing my construction job. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Comment below and let me know what city you're in. And if this story resonates with you, hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you will shock you as much as it shocked me. "At least I'm working," I muttered, but Amanda wasn't done. "Working?" She laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "You're a taxi driver, David. Grandpa Samuel would be rolling in his grave if he knew his grandson became a glorified chauffeur." That hit different. Grandpa Samuel had been my hero growing up, a self-made man who built a small trucking company from nothing in the 1960s. He taught me how to drive stick shift in his old Peterbilt when I was 12, told me stories about the open road, about honest work and dignity. He'd passed away 6 months earlier, and I still felt the weight of his absence every single day. "Don't bring Grandpa into this," I said quietly. "Why not? He spent his whole life building something real, something that mattered, and you're out here giving rides to drunk college kids and airport runs." Amanda wiped her mouth with her napkin, satisfied with her verbal destruction. "I mean, seriously, how much do you even make? 30,000 a year, 40 if you're lucky." The truth was closer to 52,000, but I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction. I'd been driving strategically, early mornings catching business travelers, late nights with the bar crowd, weekends during events. I knew Charlotte's traffic patterns like the back of my hand, knew which neighborhoods tipped well, which hotels always needed rides to the airport. But sitting there in that restaurant, watching Amanda adjust her designer watch while I calculated whether I could afford dessert, I felt smaller than I had in years. "I should go," I said, standing up abruptly. "Got rides to catch?" "Of course you do," Amanda called after me. "The app is calling." I drove for 6 hours straight after that lunch, picking up passengers and listening to their stories, their destinations, their lives. A nurse heading to her third shift of the week, a college student going home to surprise his mum, an elderly man visiting his wife in the hospital. Real people with real problems, and somehow that felt more honest than sitting in that restaurant pretending we were a normal family. 3 weeks later, Grandpa Samuel's funeral changed everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, and my worth. The lawyer's words still echo in my head. "Mr. David Mitchell, your grandfather has left specific instructions regarding his estate, and I believe this will come as quite a surprise to everyone present. But that's a story for the next part. Right now I want to know, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Drop a comment and share your experience. And don't forget to hit that like button if you're invested in finding out what those documents contained." The funeral home in downtown Charlotte was packed. Grandpa Samuel had touched more lives than I'd realized. Former employees from his trucking company, neighbors from his old street, even some of the regular customers he'd served for decades. I sat in the third row behind Amanda and her husband, wearing my only good suit, the one I'd bought for job interviews that never led anywhere. The service was beautiful. People shared stories about Grandpa's generosity, his work ethic, how he'd helped struggling families during tough times. Amanda had arranged everything, of course. She was always the organized one, the one who handled important matters, while I just drove my car around Charlotte. After the service, the lawyer, Mr. Harrison, asked the immediate family to stay behind. "Samuel left very specific instructions about the reading of his will," he said, adjusting his glasses. He wanted it done immediately after the service, with everyone present. I almost left. Wills were for people who had something to inherit, and I figured whatever Grandpa had left would go to Amanda anyway. She was the successful one, the one with the business degree and the investment properties. But something in Mr. Harrison's tone made me stay. Amanda sat forward eagerly, probably calculating how much Grandpa's house was worth, maybe thinking about his old truck collection. Mom and Dad looked tired. They'd been handling all the funeral arrangements while I worked, trying to save up enough to take a few days off. "Now," Mr. Harrison began, opening a thick folder. Samuel was very particular about how this should be handled. He left letters for each of you to be read aloud, along with the specific bequests. He started with my parents. Grandpa left them his house and a comfortable sum for retirement. Mom started crying and Dad squeezed her hand. Then Amanda's letter. "To my granddaughter Amanda," Mr. Harrison read, "you have always been driven and ambitious, and I admire that. I'm leaving you my collection of vintage trucks, which I know you'll sell to fund your next business venture. They're worth approximately $40,000. Use them wisely." Amanda's face tightened slightly. 40,000 was nice, but not the windfall she'd expected. She glanced at me with a look that said, "Well, at least I'm getting something." Then Mr. Harrison turned to me. "To my grandson David," he began, and I prepared myself for some small token, maybe Grandpa's watch or his tools. "You have always reminded me of myself at your age. People underestimated me too, called my trucking business a dead-end job, said I'd never amount to anything because I chose to work with my hands instead of behind a desk." My heart started beating faster. "David, you drive people to their destinations every day. You provide a service, you work honest hours, and you do it with dignity. That's exactly what I did for 40 years, just with bigger vehicles." Mr. Harrison paused, looking directly at me. "I've been watching your Uber earnings through the app. Yes, I knew how to use a smartphone, Amanda, despite what you thought." Amanda's mouth fell open. "David consistently earns more than most people realize because he works smart, not just hard. He knows his city, he treats his customers well, and he's built something real in the gig economy." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Therefore, I'm leaving David my entire business portfolio, the trucking company I sold in 1995, which I invested in various stocks and real estate, current value approximately $2.8 million. The silence in that room was deafening. I felt like I was floating outside my body, watching this happen to someone else. $2.8 million. The app loser had just inherited nearly $3 million. "There's more," Mr. Harrison continued. "Samuel also left detailed instructions for David about a piece of property he's been holding, a 50-acre lot outside Charlotte that's been approved for commercial development. The estimated value is an additional $1.2 million. Amanda stood up so fast, her chair fell backward. "This is impossible. There has to be a mistake. David drives for Uber. He can barely pay his rent." "Miss Amanda," Mr. Harrison said firmly, "your grandfather was very clear. He included a personal note." He handed me an envelope with my name, written in Grandpa's careful handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it and read aloud. "David, by the time you read this, you'll understand that success isn't about what other people think of your work. It's about dignity, consistency, and serving others. You've been doing what I did, just in a different century. The family business was always about transportation, and you've carried that forward in your own way. Don't let anyone ever make you feel small for honest work. I'm proud of you, and I always have been." Amanda was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. The woman who'd called me an app loser just 3 weeks earlier was looking at someone worth $4 million. But here's the thing that nobody expected, including me. This was just the beginning of the real shock. Because Grandpa Samuel had one more surprise that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. What do you think that surprise was? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because the final chapter of this story will blow your mind. Also, share this with someone who's ever been underestimated. Trust me, they'll want to hear how this ends. I didn't sleep for 3 days after the will reading. $4 million. The number kept spinning in my head as I drove my regular routes around Charlotte, picking up passengers who had no idea they were riding with a millionaire. I hadn't told anyone except my parents, and I'd asked them to keep it quiet until I figured out what to do next. Amanda had called me 6 times, but I wasn't ready to face her yet. The woman who'd spent years making me feel worthless was suddenly very interested in having a conversation with her app-loser brother. But the biggest shock was still coming. Mr. Harrison had asked me to come to his office on Friday to handle the paperwork and discuss the transition of assets. When I arrived, he had another envelope waiting for me. "David, your grandfather left this with instructions that you should only receive it after you'd had a few days to process the initial inheritance," he said, sliding the thick envelope across his desk. "He said it was the most important thing he could leave you, more valuable than all the money combined." Inside was a letter that changed everything I thought I knew about my family, about myself, and about why Grandpa Samuel had really left me his fortune. "My dear David," it began, "if you're reading this, then you now know that your work as an Uber driver was never something to be ashamed of. But there's something else you need to know, something I should have told you years ago." My hands were shaking as I continued reading. "Your father isn't your biological father. Your mother and I had an affair in 1991, during a difficult time in her marriage. You are my son, David. You are my blood, my legacy, and that's why I've been watching your career so closely. That's why I see so much of myself in you." The room started spinning. I looked up at Mr. Harrison, who was watching me carefully. "Did you know?" I asked. "Your grandfather told me the truth when he updated his will last year," he said gently. "He wanted to make sure you understood why he believed in you so strongly. It wasn't just because of your work ethic, David. It was because you're his son." Everything suddenly made sense. Why Grandpa Samuel had always taken such interest in my life. Why he'd taught me to drive at 12 when he barely spent time with Amanda. Why he'd defended my career choice to the family even when I thought he disapproved. The letter continued. "I never told you because I didn't want to hurt your parents' marriage, and because the man who raised you is a good father who loves you. But I want you to know that every day you've spent working hard, treating people with respect, and building something for yourself. You've been making me proud as your father. There's more," he'd written. "Amanda doesn't know, and neither do your parents know that you know. This is your choice to make. But I want you to understand that when she calls you an app loser, she's speaking to someone who inherited not just my business sense, but my stubborn determination to succeed no matter what anyone thinks." I sat in that lawyer's office for 2 hours, reading and rereading the letter. Grandpa Samuel, my biological father, had spent years watching me build a life through Uber, seeing in my work the same entrepreneurial spirit he'd brought to his trucking company. "He also left instructions about the business transition," Mr. Harrison said. "The trucking contacts, the real estate investments, the development property. It's all set up for someone who understands transportation and customer service. He said your Uber experience was the perfect preparation for managing his legacy." When I finally left the office, I drove straight to Amanda's house. She answered the door immediately, like she'd been waiting by the window. "David, we need to talk," she said, her voice different than I'd ever heard it, smaller, less certain. "Yes, we do," I agreed. We sat in her living room, the same one where she'd hosted family dinners and made comments about my dead-end job and app-loser lifestyle. "I owe you an apology," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I had no idea Grandpa saw your work that way. I thought I was the successful one." "Amanda," I said quietly, "success isn't about what other people think of your work. It's about dignity, consistency, and serving others. Grandpa taught me that even when I didn't realize he was teaching me." She looked up, tears in her eyes. $4 million, David. You're worth $4 million, and I called you a loser." The money doesn't change who I am, I said. I'm still going to drive for Uber while I figure out how to manage Grandpa's investments. I'm still going to treat my passengers with respect and work honest hours. The only difference is that now I know someone believed in me all along. 3 months later, I'm still driving. But now I'm also learning to manage commercial real estate and investment portfolios. I've started a small transportation company that employs other Uber drivers, giving them better benefits and more stable income. Amanda and I have dinner every Sunday now, and she's never once mentioned apps or losers. Instead, she asks about my business plans and admits she's proud of what I'm building. But the most important thing I learned isn't about money or inheritance. It's that your worth isn't determined by other people's understanding of your choices. Grandpa Samuel knew that my work had value, even when I doubted it myself. So to everyone watching who's ever been called a loser, who's ever been told their job isn't real work, who's ever felt small at family gatherings, remember this story. Remember that dignity comes from how you treat people and how hard you work, not from what other people think of your profession. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment and let me know. And if this story inspired you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that their work matters, no matter what anyone else says. Sometimes the people who underestimate you are the ones who end up most surprised by who you really are.